It's an absolute pleasure to be here today for the 17th shortlist announcement in the Taylor Prize history. It's an impressive number. For all of us at the Prize, we were elated to see the incredible response from Canadians across the country when we announced the long list just before the holiday season. The work ahead will be with our shortlisted authors that will be announced today. And we look forward to all the work we do within publicity and public awareness to make sure that these books continue to find their place within Canadians and their reading lists. The work ahead is only possible because of our partnership with RBC. And I'm delighted to be working with a new team at RBC who are here today, who have brought a level of engagement and strategy to our discussions that I think will have immense impact in the months ahead. The longevity and the strength of the prize, I believe, comes from the trustees who together formed the Charles Taylor Foundation 20 years ago, 18 years ago. And it has been through their invaluable guidance, diligence, and their own very generous and personal support that they ensure that all Canadians are aware of the essential voices that help us navigate the complexity of being Canadians in society and around the world. May I take a moment to introduce today the trustees who are with us today: Edward Taylor, Nadina Taylor, Vijay Parmar, and David Staines, who's not with us today, is busy teaching at university. And of course, an extraordinary Canadian artist, a philanthropist, teacher, thinker, and founder of the prize, Noreen Taylor.
Good morning, everybody. You know, Sue, it actually is closer to 20 years ago. Charles died in 1997, and as I picked myself off the floor in 1998 and tried to put together this prize with what were then the original trustees of the Charles Taylor Prize for Literary Nonfiction, and those trustees were Michael Bradley, Robert Bringhurst, Judy Mappin, David Staines, and me, who knew nothing about literature. And I asked, okay, guys, how many books do you think are going to be submitted in any given year? And Judy, who ran the Double Hook bookstore in Montreal, said quickly, there'll be 35. And I looked at Robert and David, and they said, yeah, 35. And with that, we decided the prize had to be awarded every 2 years, biannually, because there simply wouldn't be enough books written to make this thing competitive and to bring it to the forefront of public awareness. Fast forward nearly 20 years, this year there were 153 books submitted for the prize. That's amazing. For all the publishers in this room, for all the editors, for all the publicists, for the book designers, jacket covers, kids in creative writing schools, look what you're doing for the Canadian reading public. The Canadian reading public is reading about stories of their neighbors, and they want to read them. They want to read about stories who are about the people who are not their neighbors. And it's so important that we read about the people who are not our neighbors so we can develop compassion and make good decisions. Canadians are reading about their history, and they're reading about the history of other countries and about the challenges they face. And without the people in this room, that would not happen. So big round of applause to you. I could continue talking like this for probably the rest of your life, so I won't. And instead, I'll step back and get on with the proceedings of the day. And it is my pleasure to introduce my fellow trustee, Vijay Parmar, who is also a friend, a fellow enthusiast for the impact of reading. And I was talking before about impact investing, and investing in reading is about the best thing you can do. In any case, Vijay is not only a friend and a trustee, he is also the president of PH&N Investment Council, which is part of RBC Wealth Management, and we are so privileged to have RBC as our sponsor.
On behalf of RBC Wealth Management, I do want to thank all of you for joining us this morning for the announcement of this year's RBC Taylor Prize shortlist. As Sue mentioned, this is the 17th year that the RBC Taylor Prize will celebrate Charles Taylor by commemorating his pursuit of the excellence in the field of literary nonfiction. Now, similar to past years, the 10 books in this year's long list did not fail to impress and all exemplify the criteria established for the RBC Taylor Prize. Superb command of the English language, elegance of style, and a subtlety of thought and perception, which only makes the task of deriving this year's shortlist that much more difficult. Now, I had the pleasure of speaking with the jury a few moments ago, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your time, your effort, and the reflection spent in determining the shortlist from an extraordinary long list. Of course, Noreen, the driving force behind the Charles Taylor Foundation, for your efforts in recognizing arts, particularly in the area of non-literary and nonfiction literary achievements, and their important contributions to the Canadian fabric of our communities. RBC Wealth Management is proud to be the presenting sponsor of the RBC Taylor Prize and proud of our continued support and partnership with the Charles Taylor Foundation. Good luck to all 10 finalists. I look forward to another exciting year with the RBC Taylor Prize. Thank you.
Before introducing the jury, I want to tell you that, as Ben McNally knows, I had a rather long list of nonfiction books I had read. Not one of them made the long list. So on December 6th, when the long list was announced, I sort of went, okay, I guessed wrong all year. And then I had the pleasure of reading 10 books that hadn't come to my attention. So in a very, very cold, and I don't want to miss a book, so I'm going to read them here. In a very cold December that we've just left for a few days, I'll have you know that I was in an Egyptian jail cell, which was unbelievably filthy, battling for justice, traveling with the early explorers as they mapped this country we now call Canada. I lived with the families, I'm going to start crying. I lived with the families in Thunder Bay. We're losing children because we didn't know what was going on. I lived with doctors who worked in emergency rooms, and I had been the patient care advocate in an emergency room. Now I got to live the chaos from the doctor's end of it. I traveled, and this one was cold as well, with Bering on his expedition to find what is now the Pacific Northwest. Between covers, I faced the difficulty of finding your inner self in a world that is increasingly interconnected. I learned about how any place, any tiny place, could present infinite scope for discussion if you looked hard enough. I learned that when you open a book that has recipes in it, actually what you're doing is you're reading about the people and the families and why they lived that, but it also will probably have one or two better dinners now. And at the end of the day, I learned that I actually could fall in love with anybody. These were 10 terrific books, and I loved them all. Thank you. I couldn't make a short list. I have, as some people know, I have a small wager on what you've chosen, and it's the dinner. I'm glad it's not my job, but it is your job, so let me tell you about our wonderful jury. Christine Elliot is the long-serving and well-loved representative of the Whitby-Oshawa, I said it for you. I said it was always Oshawa-Whitby, riding for the provincial government. In government, Christine was known as being a tireless and hard worker. She was also known for her commitment to individuals and compassion. Anybody who worked with Christine in either the role of government or sought her out just speaking about whatever would know these qualities of her. And if you worked with Christine in any of the Abilities Center or the Grandview Children's Center or the Durham Mental Health Initiative, you would know that, and is for a very good reason, this commitment, compassion, and ability to get things done, that she became the first ever patient care ombudsman for the province of Ontario. Yeah, I know, she's amazing. Anne Giardini, just staggering woman, is an author, a lawyer, director of boards, and the 11th Chancellor of Simon Fraser University. Between stints of chairing the Vancouver International Writers Festival, being on the board of the Writers Trust or PEN Canada, and found the time to have two novels published, The Sad Truth About Happiness, I love these titles, and Advice for Italian Boys. And she co-authored a book on the art of writing with her son, entitled Startle and Illuminate. And these were based on what she learned from her mother, who was the well-regarded, brilliant novelist Carol Shields. As for James Polk, I first met Jim a long, long time ago. Jim is a legend in the Canadian literary community. You just are, Jim. Serving on the board, the editorial board of the House of Anansi Press, Jim oversaw the production of books by unknown authors like Margaret Atwood, Northrop Frye, George Grant, and I got to know him when he was Charles's editor. Jim's love of literature has spanned not only working as an editor, but he's also taught countless thousands about good reading and good writing in prestigious universities such as Harvard, Idaho, Ryerson, Alberta. And then, in his next life, he also advised the Minister of Culture in the province of Ontario, creating things like the Trillium Awards. He is simply earned a place in our literary lexicon that is unsurpassed.
Thank you, Noreen. Other glasses. So a very warm welcome to everyone who's come this morning in recognition of excellence in literary nonfiction. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we find ourselves on the territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nation. We also recognize the enduring presence of Aboriginal peoples on this land. What an honor it's been to be among the judges. We have read with delight more than 150 books that span the universe in style and range and topic and content and outlook. Our reading has been an education in both its well-known sense and in the sense of the roots of the word education, which has the ultimate meaning of being led out. We've been led out of ourselves into worlds and times and eras and ideas very different from what we arrived at the task with. Noreen mentioned my mother, Carol Shields, who won this prize in 2002. We're often asked as jurors, how the heck do you read 153 books? Well, before her death, my mother had this to say about the power of reading. Open a book this minute and start reading. Don't move until you've reached page 50, until you've buried your thoughts in print. Cover yourself with words. Wash yourself away. Dissolve. The first two books on the shortlist are Stephen R. Bown, Island of the Blue Foxes, Disaster and Triumph on Bering's Great Voyage to Alaska, published by Douglas and McIntyre. Cartographer and explorer Vitus Bering ended his life on a barren Aleutian island while his shipwrecked crewmates fought off vicious blue foxes, the elements, and scurvy. The hardships and privations of the explorers, scientists, laborers, and horses sent across Russia by Peter the Great to seek a route to North America beggar the modern imagination. They built their own roads, ships, and in doing so, a new kind of social order, and made enduring discoveries, all in the teeth of monstrous winds, seas, storms, bureaucracy, and hungry little foxes. Second, Daniel Coleman, Yard Work, a biography of an urban place, Woolsuck and Wynne Publishers. Daniel Coleman explores the world from a small patch of land at the back of his house, a mini empire between Cootes Paradise Marsh and Hamilton Harbor. In vivid and exacting prose, Coleman tells us of the moods and beauty of the Niagara Escarpment, the paths of local animals, the wayward tricks of the water table, the rich indigenous history of this area, and of our modern inroads into the environment, highways and houses, and slag and built culture. This is a masterpiece of nature writing, reimagining civics and possibilities as Coleman surveys what he understands is a holy land right here, behind his house and beneath his feet.
First, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the name behind this prize. No, it's not the Montreal philosopher Charles Taylor, nor is it the brutal African warlord Charles Taylor. Our Charles Taylor began his life as a journalist, a foreign correspondent, 5 years a bureau chief for Reuters in Europe, and the author of a distinguished book on Red China. In the early 70s, he came to see me at House of Anansi Press, and through the clouds of illegal smoke, he told me he would like to discuss Canada, who he was, what this country meant to him. Talk about manna from heaven. I locked the door. I made him sign things. Over the next decade, we did 3 books together, and I came to think, and I still do, he was one of the finest, most original writers in this country. Certainly, he was the nicest to work with. No back chat, no fire and fury. He was class. His very best genre, I think, was a series of brief biographies linked together to illustrate a larger Canadian theme. He gave us 6 journeys, 6 diverse Canadians who traveled to find alien cultures, to immerse themselves in someplace else and thus become truly Canadian. Hadn't thought of this. Think about it. His last book was Radical Tories. He looked to the brief biography Robert Stanfield, George Grant, Donald Creighton, many others, to show us that a distinguished kind of red Toryism is the best driving force in our country's culture. And this conservatism, far above corporate blue suits and God, what would he have made of Donald Trump, this conservatism still retains its force. The book is still in print, and it's a beauty. Unfortunately, Radical Tories was the last book. E.P. Taylor, his father, died, and as a good conservative son, Charles took over the family business. To me, it was a lot of deals and pesky real estate ideas and high-strung racehorses. But he thrived, he prospered, he did it well. I tried to lure him back into the world of books. Even with my manipulations, it was not to be. I'm very glad his writing achievement is so well remembered by this prize, with the good offices of Noreen, the trustees, and the RBC. All writers and readers and book people, thank you very much. Now I'd like to talk about, into the microphone, the third on our list, on our short list. Dr. James Maskelyk, Life on the Ground Floor, Letters from the Edge of Emergency Medicine, Doubleday, Canada. This is a brilliant, devastating book. Starting with A is for airway, going to B is for breathing, circulation, all the way to Z for the end of things, told in brilliant dispatches from the medical front. Dr. Maskelyk leads us through the many ways in which our bodies can sustain and fail us, how we become better able to tend and to attend to each other. The book is a study in contrasts, medicine as practiced in a world-class downtown Toronto hospital and at a bare-bones clinic in the Sudan and in Ethiopia. Maskelyk has had a stressful, busy, amazing sort of life as a healer in a Canadian city and in Africa, and got some respite on his farm, his grandfather's farm in northern Alberta, where a wise man in his 90s still trapped furs and talked to his son and told his son to relax into life. the book is also an education of a man as he goes through this nightmare, often, of the emergency ward. He comes to value his work. Can't win them all, but you win some. There is hope. He finds himself admiring his profession. He sees it with awe at the end as a beautiful thing. He says, medicine is life caring for itself and is the greatest story. And this story is a great and beautiful thing as well. I'd like to turn, speaking of radical Tories, to our next judge.
I have the honor of announcing the final 2 additions to our shortlist. For number 4, we have Tanya Talaga, 7 Fallen Feathers, Racism, Death, and Hard Truths in a Northern City, House of Anansi Press. Talaga has written Canada's J'accuse, an open letter to the rest of us about the many ways we contribute through action or inaction to suicides and damaged existences in Canada's Indigenous communities. Tanya Talaga's account of teen lives and deaths in and near Thunder Bay is detailed, balanced, and heartrending. Talaga describes gaps in the system large enough for beloved children and adults to fall through, endemic indifference, casual racism, and a persistent lack of resources. It is impossible to read this book and come away unchanged. The final book on our list, our short list, is Max Wallace, In the Name of Humanity, The Secret Deal to End the Holocaust, Alan Lane. As World War II drew to an end, Hitler intended further mass slaughter while other Nazi leaders scrambled to cover up evidence of genocide. Max Wallace's gripping account of the tense endgame of the Nazi nightmare is told in meticulous detail and with great compassion, culminating in the astonishing story of a Jewish freedom fighter bargaining for the salvation of the survivors with the devil himself, the architect of the killing camps, Heinrich Himmler. In conclusion, I must say it was an honor to work with my fellow jurors, with James and with Anne, as we read, reread, reflected, and discussed, sometimes very vigorously, the 153 books of literary nonfiction for the 17th RBC Taylor Prize. It was not easy to determine the long list because of the eminent quality and appropriateness of all of the books submitted. As Noreen has said, there has been a sea change in Canada's publishing habits and in Canadians' reading habits. As you can imagine, determining the shortlist was even more difficult. We would like to thank all of the authors for the excellent quality and diversity of your work. You make us all proud to be Canadians. And finally, congratulations to all of the shortlist members. We look forward to seeing you on February 26th.
As ever, I'm surprised. As ever, I've lost my bet. But I know all these books, and you've made some wonderful choices. In any case, first of all, to all the authors and publishers and publicists and everybody involved in all 10 books, if you were to listen to what Christine said, they were all fantastic. And I would have had a hard time making a decision. But to the 5 people nominated, and I'm never ever sure how many are going to be on that short list, for those 5, the fun begins right now. It's going to be an exciting time, and to that end, I'm going to invite Sue Hutchinson, our brilliant executive director of the RBC Taylor Prize, to tell you about the next 6 weeks.
You know it gets very exciting very quickly. At the start of the week, of course, we'll be in touch and outline for you many of the press opportunities and publicity opportunities that we've already lined up for the shortlisted authors. We will fly in and out. We will stay at this beautiful, and authors are welcome to stay at this beautiful Omni King Edward Hotel. And due to our associations with Sission, the Globe and Mail, the Huffington Post, Maclean's, Quill Inquirer, IFO, and TVO, These authors will meet audiences both in print, online, through the radio, via television, and many Torontonians will gather, and this is an exciting literary event for Torontonians, who could gather and witness this esteemed group in a free public panel presented by the Toronto Public Library and IFO. And this year, that will be taking place at the spectacular Lillian H. Smith on College Street. They will take part in Ben McNally's brunch, which you all, I'm sure, are familiar with, and those tickets are probably mostly sold out, but there are a few left. And then, of course, they will be gathering again at the King Edward on February 26th, and the jury, I know, will have many debates over the weeks ahead to name that final book. This year we're on the top floor in the historic Crystal Ballroom, newly opened, and we're excited about this new event where, of course, our friends of Event Source, who have been so generous to us, will be making sure that we look and sound our best. And please stay tuned in the weeks ahead. We have another quite innovative programming announcement to make, and we'll let you all know when that is.